pitching instructors here at ISA. And I am going to talk through just some of the basic principles and language that we use here when we talk to our pitchers so that you're familiar with it, like Coach Jenna just said. So we've kind of have it broken down into 5 parts. The first one being mound presence, and then our stride, how we should look pretty much in the middle of our pitch, like we're in a K, and then the arm whip and our snap and follow through. So the first one is our mound presence, and I've broken it down to 3 parts. And this is the only time I will talk about rules today because there are many and they are confusing. But these are the 2 biggest ones we see at like the 10U through 14U age. The first one being you must have 1 foot in contact with the mound at all times. So when they rock back, we have a habit, especially at that 12U age, of picking our foot up off the mound because we're rocking back, and that makes sense, and then putting it back down to get us more forward momentum, and we're not allowed to do that. So 1 foot has to stay in contact with the mound plate at all time. The second one, and this is the biggest one at that 14U age, is the hands together. Once they come together, they cannot come apart. So we like to teach that when you step on the mound, your hands are apart already. You get the sign from your catcher, you put the ball in your glove, and you start your pitch. Once that ball is in your glove, you cannot bring it back out again unless you are pitching the ball. So those are the only 2 rules. If you want to talk rules, I would love to. You can find me after. But those are the 2 biggest ones at this age. Number 2 is attitude. Mostly about the positive mental attitude. We use that a lot in the bullpen. Pitchers, well, softball players in general, and girls ages 10 to 14, and then pitchers especially, are pretty hard on themselves, and we see it a lot. Like, I can't throw a strike today, or I can't do this, or I'm so bad. So what we're trying to create is more of a positive atmosphere of positive self-talk, and encouraging our teammates and creating that positive mental attitude, especially on the mound. And that leads me into the third one of composure, of keeping our cool. As pitchers, we are the center of the field, and the ball is in our court literally every single pitch. So what they need to do is make sure that they are positive, keep their chin up even when maybe the umpire's not our best friend. Maybe Uncle Joe's out in the field yelling at me in right field, which may or might not be a true story. So just making sure that we are remaining calm the whole time and allowing our teammates to stay positive as well. And then the next one is going to be push off and our stride. So creating forward momentum. Yes, I used a picture of myself, but I couldn't find one that I wanted to show. So in number 1 up here, you'll see Jenny Finch creating forward momentum. So it's that rock back we talked about with rule number 1 just a few minutes ago, creating that forward momentum and forward drive. Everything we do should be forward. So that includes our glove. Our glove should be straight up, straight down going forward. That includes our stride should be straight forward. Anything that takes us away from home plate is going to detract from any power we could get from striding straight forward. And then the second one is creating space between the mound and our drive foot. So making sure we're really pushing off and not just stretching our foot out really far and pulling ourselves through. That push mentality from our backside, and we'll talk about it a little more in just 1 minute, is what's going to create power rather than a pulling motion with our front side. And then 3, getting sideways, which you can see in this bottom one. With this, I would say the 2 biggest things are, 1, you can know when you get sideways when your hips are facing the complete opposite direction that you started, perpendicular, and that your glove is also driving straight out. Those will be 2 big visual cues. And then the myth I have down there, you want to drive out as far as possible. This creates a lot of problems as girls start to learn to pitch, kind of what I just said. We're stretching our foot out and pulling ourselves through instead of really driving through with the backside of our body. So that kind of driving out too far and then getting off balance and pulling ourselves through is actually going to make us pitch slower. The next one is being in a stacked position with a strong plant leg. This is Addie on our 16U team. She does a really good job of this. So what being stacked means, and you can ask your girls this and they should know it, is that you can draw a straight line from your back shoulder, your back hip, and your back knee. They're all stacked on top of one another. That helps with the driving through. And then this strong front plant leg is another thing that's kind of easy to visually notice. they shouldn't be walking through the pitch, and they shouldn't be lunging into the pitch. So keeping that firm, strong plant leg still through the entire pitch helps us use our core and our hips a little more and get some more power. And then the second to last point is the arm whip. I like to tell girls that we are a cooked limp noodle. We should not be tense and pulling down and keeping our elbow super tense and our wrist super tense. We should be whipping our arm down like a noodle. So this is the only part of our arm circle that actually generates power. Doing this doesn't do anything but help you create a legal pitch. It's from that K down is where we generate power in our arm circle. And then the last one is just our snap and our follow through. So generating spin, a four seam fastball and kind of the basis of all pitching is gripped the same way as a fastball or as a ball when they throw it. We teach it the same way in pitching and just normal throwing. And this is what generates spin. That four seam, you literally should be able to count all four seams going on top of each other. It's like a C and a backwards C. If it is a sideways spin or something wonky, they're usually not getting their palm facing forward, and then usually letting go of the ball a little sideways. So that four seam spin is going to be the fastest way to get from point A to point B through that snap. Any questions? Cool. Thanks, guys.
Two, 0, 3, 2. Oh no.
Oh no. Tech team's not doing so great on here, sorry.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Tanner. If you don't know me, I know most of you. I've been with ISA for 6.5 years. Started out as just kind of baseball. That was my background. But now the last couple years taken a much bigger role with softball, and I've loved every minute of it. So I'm all in, full bore softball hitting. We're just going to talk briefly on kind of 4 key points that are easy for you guys to see as well if you ever are practicing with your daughter or kind of helping her in the basement, garage, here, wherever, just so you and I are speaking the same lingo, basically. The 4 points that we touch on with the girls every single day, my goal is that they have these memorized, they understand what each point means, they know how to apply it in their actual swing. So we will go in depth on these 4 things, but every good hitter does these 4 things well, and every average hitter does about 2 of these things well. So if we can get really good at all 4 of these things, there's a really good chance your daughter will be a really, really good hitter. So the first one is loading into our back hip. And this is something that our body doesn't want to do. Like me, I'm standing straight-legged right now because that's what my body wants to do. I'm not giving this presentation like this because it's not comfortable. It's creating tension. My body doesn't want to do it, so we have to force our hitters to do this. And you can see Yelich here. He starts really tall. He's tall in his stance, and then as the pitcher's getting ready, he is sinking into that back hip. And that's how he is able to generate so much more force in his bat. And he's not an overly big guy. He's not big, bulky. He's kind of built like a string bean, especially early on in his career. He was really skinny, but he does a really good job of sinking right into that back hip there. So I have this video saved on my phone, and I will constantly show girls this video. I'll film them and say, right now, do you look like this when you're loading? Well, not really. I'm just kind of tipping. So kind of forcing our girls to get lower into the back hip is going to help a ton. And then on the next slide, you kind of see one where they do, one where they don't. So both of these girls are really good hitters. This hitter here hits the ball probably 5 miles an hour on average harder. And they both have a very similar swing, but you can see this hitter here, her weight is shifted forward. So this She hasn't started her swing yet, but she is here with her hips. Okay, so she's tipping forward. She's not loading her back hip. She's kind of loading into her front hip. Kind of hard to see with the black background, black pants, but I promise you, she is hinged into that back hip a lot more. So she'll hit a ball 70, 72 miles an hour. One of our top hitters in terms of exit velo. And on average, she'll be 65, 66, which you're probably thinking, okay, 5 miles an hour a difference. What does that translate to? Usually for every mile an hour is about 8 feet. So if we can hit a ball 5 miles an hour harder, we can hit a ball 40 feet farther, which is the difference between an outfielder catching it and standing on second base. So again, if we can just simply load into our back hip more, we will hit a ball harder. Something easy, kind of easy to see when you're working with your daughters, stand on the side. Always helps to film them in slow motion. Everything looks great, full speed usually, but film them in slow motion and see, are they sinking? Are their hips going back? Almost like they're sitting in a high chair or a stool. That's what we want our hips to do before we swing. And then number 2, a launch position. Your girls have heard me say these 2 words 500 times, and I'm going to say it another 800 times after the new year. Launch position. The launch position is what we're in right before we swing. Okay, so this is a player that used to play for us for a couple of years. She's now playing at Minnesota, and she does a really good job at getting to what we call a launch position. We have our stance, our launch position, and then our swing. So what we look like the moment before we swing is huge. That's the most important thing about our swing. If I could take one softball player and perfect one thing, it would be their launch position, not their swing, their actual launch position. So a couple main points: bat knob, catcher's feet. Very, very important. Back elbow, pointing behind them. Okay, so if I took her front arm away, took the bat away, it would look like she's about to punch a punching bag. Like that is the position we want to hit from, right there. And if I went up to a punching bag and started getting ready like this, everyone would laugh. And if I went up to a punching bag like this, everyone would laugh. But we have a lot of girls that hit from here and a lot of girls that hit from here. And both of those have some negative side effects. So again, if we can pretend like we're going to punch something and then add a bat at our hand, that's where we're going to hit from. So this bat angle here, bat knob to the catcher's feet, creates like a bat whip, versus if the bat was just straight up and down, it wouldn't whip, it would just go forward. So we need our barrel to be delayed, just like an actual whip. The end of the whip is delayed, which makes it move 5 times faster than the beginning of the whip. And that's the goal with our bat. So, and again, easy to see. Film your daughter, pause it right before she's about to swing, and hopefully bat knob, catcher's feet, elbow behind, sinking into that back hip.
One thing I would add to that is sometimes when girls feel like they have to like muster up a little bit more power, they're actually doing this with their load. They're here and then twist this way, and their hands disappear. So if you're doing front toss, that's something where you can watch it. Their hands are disappearing. They're rotating back versus loading their hands back.
This is the exact same hitter, kind of a before and after. This was day 1 of testing, and then this was kind of a month or 2 later. So we can see here, her bat's very vertical, bat knob pointing at the ground, elbow pointing at the ground. So she is punching a punching bag like this, and she's not going to punch it very hard. Second picture, bat knob, catcher's feet, elbow pointing behind. So she is now punching like this. This day she hit a ball 64 miles an hour. This day she hit a ball 70 miles an hour. Again, that 6 mile an hour difference, almost 50 feet that she added to a ball that's hit into the air. And I promise you, if you're an infielder and someone hits a ball 70 miles an hour at you, you will not want to field it. 64 miles an hour, you're more likely to get in front of it. So just that little difference there makes a huge difference in the actual swing. But again, I tell the girls all the time, it's like, act like you're going to punch me, put your hand there, and now swing. So that's really kind of the main thing that you guys can look for, again, is hip, bat knob, elbow. Those three things. So up to this point, we have not talked about how to actually swing. Most of what we coach, most of what I correct, or most of what I look at in a cage is how they get ready. Okay, because if we get ready poorly, then it doesn't really matter how we swing. But in terms of swinging, all of our power, or most of our power, comes from the first 25%. So from point A to point B, that's where our power comes from. Because if you, again, think about a whip, if I move my hand fast, the end of the whip will move fast. If I move my hand slow, the end of the whip's not going to do much at all. So we talk to the girls about being explosive with our hip and our elbow. Okay, so these two movements there. My hip is going forward, my elbow is going into my ribs. And that is what starts this whip. That is what kind of delays the bat knob, or delays the barrel there. The barrel's lagging behind, creating that whip. So again, if a girl is struggling to hit for power, or you think, she's really strong, just why isn't she hitting super well? Sometimes girls will ease into their swing and try to finish strong. Like they swing maybe a little bit hesitant in the beginning, but the beginning is where the power truly happens. So we have to be the most explosive in that first little kind of 25%. So explosive, hip and elbow. This is one of our college players. She plays at Edgewood in Madison, and she hit the ball really, really hard. Some of the hardest softballs I've ever seen. She's on our all-time leaderboard, and she did a really good job with this. So she, from there to there, she fired her back hip, drove her back elbow. She has not moved her hands at all. It's literally just hip and elbow. She has not moved her hands, which means this barrel is lagging behind a ton, and it's going to whip really, really fast. Really, really fast. She was hitting balls mid to upper 70s, which in high school is unheard of. That's usually what kind of upperclassmen in college usually hit. So she could hit a ball really, really hard because she was explosive with those two things. She did a really good job with that. So again, if you kind of freeze your daughter's swing, here's kind of what we should see. Hip turned forward, elbow driven into the ribs, bat lagging behind back here. And then the last part is we need our hands to go forward. As a young toddler, we didn't swing a bat as an infant. Toddler, we do this, we spin. Because my hips and my shoulders want to spin together. My body is comfortable doing this. But as soon as I use my hips and then my shoulders, that doesn't feel comfortable. So we have to train that for hitters. We have to fire our hips and then our hands. So you can see on this line, her bat gets in the hitting zone back here. Right now she could hit a ball, and it stays in the hitting zone till about there. So she has a huge margin of error. She can be early and hit it. She can be late and hit it. All because her hands go forward until they can't go forward anymore. So this is a huge part on if your daughter is maybe struggling to make contact. This is what I would look at first. Look at her swing, freeze it right here, and you should see both arms forward, straight, bat still in the zone. So we teach our hitters, when these arms are straight, your bat should be pointing at the first baseman. A lot of girls like to do this and yank their bat out of the zone, and now they have to time it perfectly because they're working with this little bit of hitting zone that their bat's in versus this much that their bat's in. Okay, so this is a huge part of just making contact, is keeping your hands moving forward, keeping your bat moving forward. You'll hear the words extension. If you're by the cages, I'll say extension a lot, and that just means extending your back arm with your bat still in the zone. So very hard to do as a hitter because our body doesn't want to do it. It wants to just spin, but the good hitters do this really, really well. This is my favorite slide. This is, again, that college player who hit balls really, really hard, but she doesn't hit in college. She pitches in college because she struggled to sometimes make contact. She could hit a ball to the moon, but she would swing and miss a lot. And here's why. Her bat is out of the zone. Her arms are not straight. So she was the type of hitter that was really powerful, but would just yank the bat across her body. right? So she's not in the zone very, very long. Versus, we got a little 10U here, whose bat is in the zone forever. Arms are basically extended, bat's in the zone, pointing at first base. She is going to make contact more than her. 10-year-old, 18-year-old, she hits hard. She will eventually hit hard. Doesn't hit hard, but hits the ball almost every single time. She has a much longer margin of error than the hitter over there does. Okay, so if you watch your daughter, freeze frame it. Hopefully we see this right here. Extension of the arms, bat still in the zone. She's going to make a lot of contact. Last slide. Ready at release. So a phrase that I want to kind of keep consistent, a phrase that you guys can repeat to your daughters as well. Being ready at release is super important. So what we mean by that is when the pitcher releases the ball, we have to be ready as hitters. Mentally ready, physically ready. So by being physically ready, we are in our launch position. Okay, so a lot of times, especially when you're younger and maybe it's machine pitch or coach pitch, it's kind of built into your mind like, oh, when the ball is in the air, I get ready. Because that's how slow the ball is coming, right? So you can afford to get ready when the ball is in the air. But at the really competitive 12U level, 13U, 14U, 15U, that no longer exists. If you are getting ready when the ball is in the air, you are going to be out. So we need to teach the girls that all of your backward movement happens when the pitcher has the ball. And then your forward movement happens as the ball is in the air. So one of my favorite quotes, Jeff West, he's coached college softball for 30 years. Loading early is key. If you're ready when the pitcher releases the ball, you control the at-bat, not the pitcher. So as a hitter, and we'll talk a lot more after the new year with the girls about this, but as a hitter, I want to be ready before the pitcher releases the ball, and I want the mentality of I dare you to throw a strike. I'm ready, throw me a strike. That's the mentality that we want our hitters to have. Versus if we're trying to get ready while the ball's in the air, we're playing defense. We're just trying to make whatever contact we can. Versus I want them thinking offensively. I want them just holding, you got to hold them back to swing. Like a bull getting ready to bust out of the cage. That's what kind of the mentality that we want our hitters to have. So if we're ready when the pitcher releases, then we can have that mentality. Any questions? Awesome. Cool. Sorry if that was too long.
I am Peyton. A lot of the girls call me Coach P. I'll figure out how to do this. I handle a lot of the catching stuff here. So I'm going to talk about what we do for catching. If your daughter is not a catcher right now, that is okay. You have a daughter that's either a pitcher, so this will be something you can watch for, or a lot of kids when they get to high school and they're athletic and they like to talk a lot, sometimes they just switch right into a catcher. So good thing to just talk about and listen to. So a big thing that I do is I like to talk to the catchers about the role that they have, and then also pretty much that they're the leader of it and how everyone is looking to them on the field. Every player on the field is looking towards the catcher, so that kind of just designs them into that natural leader. I tell all the girls at ISA, whether you're quiet in the classroom or at home, doesn't matter, because when you step on the dirt or the turf or whatever it is, you're allowed to be a different personality, and you should be. You should come out of your shell, and that's where you talk more, you yell more, your presence on your team. So super important just for softball players in general, not just catchers. Big part of being a catcher that we talk about is how we treat our umpires. We should thank a catcher because they're the ones that suck up the whole game, or they should be. So we talk about, how we talk to the umpires. Really big thing is we don't turn around. If you didn't know that, catchers really are not supposed to turn around and say, hey, where was that? Why didn't you call that a strike? That's a no-no. So no turning around to the umpires. Make sure you're having a good rapport with them, introducing themselves to the umpires right away when the game starts. So little things like that we want to make sure that the girls are doing, especially at a young age. That does go a long way with umpires of all ages. So role of the catcher, that's a big thing. I personally believe that physically wise, most important job of a catcher is receiving. I go around and I ask the catchers when we start off the season what their favorite skill is, receiving, blocking, throwing. It's always number one thing that they hate doing is blocking unless they're really good at it. And the thing that they like doing the most is throwing girls out because you're the star of the show and everything. You're great, which is true. So I love throwing down, but unfortunately we receive a ton more. So that's going to be a lot of the framing, which if you look at any college players, any MLB catchers, anything like that, they practice framing and receiving or presenting all the time. So that's going to be the timing of it. One thing I really like to do is I like to use those ramps. If you've ever seen a lot of the hitting drills, they have those wooden ramps in the cages. Basically, what I like to have them picture is that a catcher's glove should start towards the bottom of that ramp, and they work up and out. So when they start, their elbow is bent, and when they finish, their elbow should still be bent, but you're getting your arm a little bit straighter. So if you are a parent that likes to sit on a bucket, if you have a pitching daughter, when you're sitting on a bucket, fantastic. You're catching, you're doing all those things. But if your daughter has a pitching coach, maybe start to ask if the catchers can come in so they can start catching live. It's helpful for everyone, honestly, catchers, pitchers, pitching coach, whoever. But something to kind of remember if you're the ones that are doing the catching or watching a catcher that's not in the program, when they start low and they work up, you want to try to think of most of the strikes that pitchers throw are pretty much below the knees. So for us, we know that when we go in the cages or the girls go in the cages, a home run ball is at the thighs. That's fantastic. Anyone can come in and pitch a home run ball right there. So if a catcher's sitting here or we're sitting on a bucket, having our glove up by our chest, that's a home run ball. Okay, so we teach our catchers to start low, all the way at the ground, bottom of the ramp, and work up towards the bottom of the knees. So that's super important. So even when your girls are hitting, if you just have defensive players that are on the field and they're hitting, try to make sure they get a lot of those low balls because I think that's going to be a lot more popular of an ideal coming up, that low is better for the pitching. So receiving, so that's huge. 3 body parts that we always want behind the ball when girls are receiving is going to be nose, chest, and hand. Obviously, it has to be a hand of somewhere for catching the ball. Okay, so 3 body parts. Those are really big. That gets the girls to move and be a little bit more athletic getting towards the ball, making it look like strikes. Sometimes you get girls that are a little bit younger or even just starting out catching where they are a little bit wobbly. Looks like they're trying to grab onto something or stretching out the legs a lot. Really easy thing to try to have them do is just widen out their feet. It's pretty natural for girls' hips to sit a little bit differently than you see some of the baseball catchers where they're kind of up on their haunches, which is called a secondary position. Not typically a term I like to use because I don't really believe in it for softball. But if with our hips being shaped a little bit differently, we can have our knees go in a little bit more to have our feet widen out. So something to look for just to make sure they're a little bit more balanced. So that's receiving. Blocking is the next part I love. It's super fun when girls figure it out. That is one thing that I really like to have the girls do a lot more homework when they're at home with tennis balls. Tennis balls are fantastic. Tossing it against a wall, having it come back to them, or having one of the parents or siblings sit in front and just even roll a tennis ball is huge. Blocking is a lot about timing, especially in this age group. It's when the ball is just about to hit the ground. That's when the movement starts to happen. Easiest way to explain blocking is glove hits the ground first, then knees. I do talk to the girls a lot, and this is in general. There's a lot of coaches with a lot of different opinions, what's right or what's wrong. Whoever gives you the most playing time, that's who you should say yes coach to that day. But for the most part, we have to try to figure out how their body is going to move the fastest. So if a girl comes in and she's not doing something that I personally believe is the fastest, we got to figure it out. So for the most part, for blocking, the best thing you can think is that we'd rather be a pillow with our chest rather than a wall. So that's pretty much easiest that way. And then we figure it out from there. A lot of girls have an issue with blocking because they're afraid of getting hurt in different areas. So one thing I try to teach a lot is that once the ball hits the ground, pitchers throw the ball, hits the ground, we are no longer a catcher. We are pretty much like a hockey goalie. We get our body in front of it, and you want that ball to hit your chest, not your glove. So that's the easiest way to think about that. But girls have a ton of stuff they can do at home. That is something that they should definitely be doing at home just to get faster. Lastly, with throwing, everyone's favorite. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah.
For blocking, what do you look for? What could they look for as last minute your knees?
Yeah. So 2 separate motions. So you should really see it's a boom, boom. It is 2 separate motions of the glove hitting the ground first and knees flying back. Nothing should be collapsing at the same time. You want your chest to come over. And I always have the girls think that your belly button goes into your spine, which kind of causes that pillow movement instead of belly button out, which makes you a wall. Easiest way just to protect and keep their body on it is the chin goes to the ball no matter where it goes. So if a ball comes down, their chin is out, they're watching it, it bounces, my chin is following, now it's coming up into my chest. Not only are their eyes on the ball still, but it's protecting this area, which is not covered. So that's a huge thing. So chin down to ball. So a lot of times, actually, a lot of the drills, what we'll do is we'll sit, the girls will save their knees, they'll be on their knees, and they'll be down in their blocking position. And all the drill is they're watching the coach, watching the ball, watch that ball come up into their chest, or they're moving around to wherever the ball is. So basically watching that their belly button's tucking in, they're being soft with their chest, but you want that ball to hit your chest, not hitting the glove. Okay, when the glove hits the ground, it does not come up. Okay, questions with that? Good? Okay, so last part of throwing. I personally love throwing off our knees. It is quick, I think, for the most part for a lot of the girls. There are, I don't believe that everyone should only throw on their knees. For example, if a ball gets pitched way up high, they have to be comfortable with getting their feet moving forward and being up on their feet. I think of knee throwing as more of a graduation type of thing. We do a ton of stuff with all of the girls about throwing form and good transfers with that. We need good throwing form in order to graduate to throwing on our knees, just so there's no strain, especially at the age with any muscles, any shoulders issues, anything like that. So that is something where if you're working on your daughter with throwing down, which is fun and easy to do, best thing I can tell you is that you want to make sure that when they're throwing, if my target's in front of me, I need to get my body turned to the side. Because a lot of issues when they're throwing down is because where it's more here or even 45. So we want to be a full turn from our target. So we're working forward. So less strain on the arm. All the girls have been introduced to throwing back on their knees, especially just to the pitcher. So that's getting a full turn and working on it that way, just to save their legs so they're not receiving and standing up and throwing back every time. So it saves the knees and the hips a lot. Your girls in this age, hip strength is actually a huge thing. A lot of people give, they say it's all in the knees for catchers, but really what it is, just for longevity wise, it's the hips. Band work, they have a couple of fun exercises they get to do. So really making sure that they're going home and doing those, especially before tournaments or after, and stretching out the hips. Those are really big things for me. For you guys, big one is pigeon, and I am not going to show you. But okay, so these are all mostly yoga. They stem from yoga poses, but really, we did them a ton in college for our catching programs. A lot of them have to do with no equipment. You pretty much lay on the ground, and you guys can all do these too. They're really good for you. But basically, what it is it's pretty much laying on the ground. You drop your leg down, and they are just holding these poses just to get their hips more flexible. If you think about when they're school and they're sitting, your hips tighten up, your muscles tighten up, so it's a lot of tightness. When they're sitting in their squat constantly, it's a lot of hip tightness. So we want to get the muscles stretched out. So whether it's pigeon, we call it, it's pretty much laying on the ground with your leg tucked up as high as you can go. Figure 4, you're laying on your back, and all you do is you put your knee or your foot over the top of your knee, lay back, and this is a great one for them. And then there's one really fun one that they all love, where it's basically just tapping heel to heel, knee to knee, back and forth. So these honestly take at most 4 minutes. It doesn't take very long. So you go to your daughters and say, did you do your hip exercises today? They know what they are. So with that, last thing, so transfers. I have a ton of girls that come to me and say, Coach B, I need to get my pop time faster. And it is true when you go to start getting looking at colleges and that kind of thing, coaches ask, what's your pop time? Transfers are huge. Lifting is very important. Rotation on the ball is extremely important, which we do all of that every day for practice, for warming up. So they work on those things. But for catchers, you want to think about all transfers being above water. So my shoulders are the water level. Everything from here above water, staying above water, throwing forward. Not only is that good for them just for their arms and longevity wise, but it's also fast. So if I see a catcher come in, she probably has a decently strong arm for the most part, but we got to get the faster you get that ball from our hand to our other hand forward, the better. So that's a big thing. The faster you can get those transfers, and that can also be done just with tennis balls. That's it. Okay. Any other questions? Most part. Cool. Thanks for listening.